Hello, I'm Jonathan Knowles, Product Manager for Apple's QuickTime technology, and I'm pleased to be here to give you this technical update to QuickTime 2.5. Let's start off by taking a look at the evolution of QuickTime. I think most people's perception of QuickTime is that it's small, postage stamp, jerky video playing on their computer screen, like this.
It might sound fatuous to inquire whether this sort of...
We've innovated with QuickTime over the years, and as a matter of fact, with today's QuickTime, we can play video in software only that looks this good.
There's just one, and there's no mistaking it, one. Just no...
But bigger, better, smoother is only one of the ways we innovate with QuickTime technology. Another is by supporting different media types. For example, QuickTime supports a text track. And with QuickTime 2.5, there's an API that allows capturing closed caption information directly into the text track at the time of digitizing the video. By having a text track, we can do some interesting things. For example, I have a music video here, and I want to search to find out where does the artist say the word got. And when I start playing,
got into an accident.
Let's try one more. Where does he say mm-mm-mm? You do have the ability to show the text information if you want. And using Apple's WorldScript technology, you can have as many text tracks as you want, supporting as many languages as you want. Imagine searching the internet for information on, say, Bosnia, and getting, as a result of your search, a video clip of a CNN reporter who used the word Bosnia in a story they did. By supporting text, we have some very powerful capabilities in QuickTime. Another media type that's new to QuickTime 2.5 is the 3D media type. This is where you can start to imagine just what we mean when we start talking about the QuickTime media layer, the integration of different Apple media technologies into one common set of APIs, one common container for all your multimedia needs. In this QuickTime movie, we're actually playing a 3DMF file using Apple's QuickDraw 3D technology. Now that's interesting, but what's real interesting is that by combining QuickTime and QuickDraw 3D in this fashion, we can do things that typically were very difficult. For example, we are compositing in real time a 3D image on top of a video image. And this isn't a canned demonstration I'm doing for you here. Let's actually go in, look at the 3D track, adjust the size of this 3D object, and say, make it this size and render it in this space. For the first time, we bring the worlds of 3D and video together on the desktop and make it very easy for anyone to work with these media types. Another new feature in QuickTime is support for real-time ray trace sprites. Now, just as a quick review, let me remind you of what sprites are. Sprites are small, independent objects, each living in their own track that can be acted upon individually. A lot of games use sprite technology. And with QuickTime sprite tracks, we can do things like this. In this example, you see one sprite in the upper right-hand corner and several more sprites in the lower left-hand corner. Notice that they can go in front of and behind each other as they move across the screen. And of course, they're composited on top of a picked file. Now, as I said, QuickTime 2.5 supports real-time ray trace sprites. What does that mean? It means that we can start to do some very interesting things for games developers. In this example, the sprite is the magnifying glass. And by doing a real-time ray trace sprite, we will actually be able to model the glass in the magnifying lens in real time. So we're simply moving this sprite around on top of a picked file and in real time modeling a magnifying glass. We'll come back in a little bit and talk about where we're going with real-time ray trace sprites. It's very exciting. Another new feature of QuickTime 2.5 is support for Apple's QuickTime software MPEG extension that allows you to play back MPEG content on any PowerPC computer. Now, because we're doing this through QuickTime, we can do some things that you typically couldn't do very easily with MPEG content before. For example, I may want to play this video back fast forward, or even reverse. I may want to take a selection of MPEG content and copy it and paste it, maybe into my word processor, my database, wherever. You're used to that with QuickTime, and we're simply supporting MPEG through QuickTime with this extension. I think that everyone is probably familiar with Apple's QuickTime VR technology. The ability to work with real-world objects and real-world panoramas as any other media type. It's another innovation of QuickTime. And as we start to move towards the QuickTime media layer, we have some more interesting integration points between QuickTime and QuickTime VR that we'll talk about in just a minute. Another media type supported in QuickTime is music. The QuickTime music architecture in QuickTime 2.5 has been significantly enhanced. We now play back music files at 16-bit 44 kilohertz stereo, that's CD quality audio. In this example, I'm going to play back a MIDI file that's in the QuickTime music track using the QuickTime music architecture's synthesizer to synthesize a piano. Now keep in mind, this is not a recording of a piano. This is simply a 10K MIDI file playing back through QuickTime. Notice the quality. Now clearly the 10K file size is a significant advantage as a media type useful for the internet. 10K is smaller than most text and graphic images on most web pages. That's clearly an advantage, but another advantage to using QuickTime for your music needs is the ability to change the instrument at the time of playback. For example, QuickTime today supports a variety of different instruments. Right now we're using an acoustic grand piano, but if we wanted to play this file back with an organ, it's just a few mouse clicks away. We're now playing back this same file, simply synthesizing an organ. And with QuickTime 2.5, we have an API that allows you to include any instrument you want, to synthesize any sample you want as an instrument. This is very exciting for developers. Developers can now deliver a very unique aural experience as part of their multimedia content. But it's also important for end users, because we think that QuickTime helps to make the Macintosh fun. In this example, I'm going to take this sound file, it could be any sound file, drag it up, drop it in the QuickTime movie, and now, when I play it back, that's my instrument. It's that easy to work with music. Now let's talk a little bit about the QuickTime media layer. As we start to take Apple's different multimedia technologies such as QuickTime, QuickTime VR, and QuickDraw 3D and integrate them, some very exciting things start to happen. With the introduction of the QuickTime VR C API, that's QuickTime VR 2.0, we start to see some real interesting combinations of QuickTime and QuickTime VR. For example, localized audio becomes possible. In this example, I'm looking around a typical QuickTime VR panorama. However, I'm going to go ahead and start some music in here. What I want you to notice is as I move towards the source of the music, the volume will get louder, and as I move away from it, the volume will get softer. You'll also note that this shows a QuickTime movie embedded within a QuickTime VR panoramic scene. It's higher, and as I move away, the volume gets lower. Let's take a look at some other examples of mixing QuickTime and QuickTime VR. In this example, we'll take a QuickTime video sprite and embed it within a QuickTime VR panorama. This is very exciting. You'll notice that in most QuickTime panoramas, there's not much going on. But by embedding a QuickTime video sprite, again, integrating Apple's QuickTime technology into QuickTime VR, we get some very interesting possibilities. We actually have someone walking around the QuickTime VR panorama while we're moving around. Let's talk a little more about integrating QuickTime and QuickTime VR. I think that most people are familiar with QuickTime VR panoramas that allow you to jump from one node to the other, so that in this example, as we look around the scene in here, we can move to the next room simply by clicking on the doorway. And now we're in another room. We've jumped to another node. But by integrating QuickTime and QuickTime VR in another way, we can use QuickTime movies to transition from one QuickTime VR node to another. Here's an example from a third-party developer. We'll start off in a QuickTime VR node here, and we can move around as we'd expect to be able to. And we want to move forward to this point right out here on the bridge, but instead of jumping to it, we'll actually use a QuickTime movie to transition to that QuickTime VR node. And of course, once we stop, we can look around and see where we came from. And if we want to move up to the next node, no problem. We'll use another QuickTime movie to transition to the next QuickTime VR node. And of course, once again, we can stop, look around, zoom in, zoom out, all the things that you'd expect to be able to do. A much more lifelike experience simply by combining a couple of these technologies. Now, I promised you before we'd take a look at some of the advanced ray trace, real-time ray trace sprite technologies we're working on here. So let's take a look at that very quickly. In this example, the water that you see in this scene is a real-time ray trace sprite. And it looks very, very lifelike. This is simply a picked file in the background here, and the motion of the water is a real-time ray trace sprite. Now, because it's done in real time, something very interesting becomes possible. I'm going to actually take my mouse and I'm going to drag it across the water, and I want you to see what happens. I can actually interact with this because it's a sprite in real time and actually affect the sprite, delivering a very, very lifelike experience. Now, these are just some of the features in QuickTime 2.5. I encourage you to take a look at the QuickTime website at www.quicktime.apple.com to get the latest information on this exciting technology. Thanks.